10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. The Campillos, it's a three-way track, and everyone.
Hola, mi amigos. Welcome to the 30 hours of Karting Campillos 2023, one of the most intense, insane endurance races in the entirety of motorsport, never mind endurance karting. Some endurance races go on for a while, for 6, for 12, maybe even 24 hours. We're just that little bit more insane. We're that little bit more crazy. 30 hours. It's the toughest, roughest race in endurance karting. And it's very different in 2023 compared to last year. In 2022, the start of the race was sunny, dry, and absolutely beautiful. This year, as you can see, it's overcast, there's been a lot of rain overnight, and it's a very greasy start to the event. It's going to be a very tricky start on what we're going to get, and it's going to be very, very difficult to see who is going to be at the front end by the time we wrap up. We obviously have had a very close qualifying session. The Creatia squad are going to be lining up in pole position in the number 6 kart. But, of course, tradition and the time-honoured way of starting the 30 hours of Karting Campillos means we get our traditional Le Mans start. So the drivers are heading out onto the circuit. We're going to wander over as we have some incredible competitors. They've come from all over Europe here this week. 42 teams, a new record, and they have come all over Andalucía, from Spain and Portugal, across from Belgium and France to Germany to Switzerland to Moldova to Belarus, the United Kingdom. They have come far and wide to be here and be in this fantastic arena. Some of the most incredible karting racers in the world are racing here. They may not be the most household names, but in terms of the intensity of the driving battle, there's nothing quite like endurance karting. It tests everything. It tests your skill, your determination, your discipline, your calm, your resolve. It is such a difficult form of the sport. And it may not get the same credence and the colour as the FIA karting in Europe or the World Championship, but this venue has been there as part of the World Championships in 2021. So the drivers are racing on a world-class circuit. I actually went out on these karts yesterday during one of the practice sessions. It is very tough to stay competitive. You've got to be on your A game. You need to know exactly when to brake, exactly when to turn in, throttle application, turn in radius. It's all very, very tough and very complex. It's also worth noting that for 30 hours of racing, you've got to have such cool commitment and discipline to make it work. So, as you can see, the teams are trying to get in together and have the full team photo experience. Very tough in 2023, considering that we've got more teams on the starting grid this year than has ever previously been run. This is the 5th edition of the 30 hours of Karting Campillos. We had a fabulous opening ceremony last night where we greeted every single one of the teams and all of the drivers competing in the competition. The very nice social up at the top of the hill. It was very nice to see everybody here. But this is what all of this hard work, all of this determination has been building to. The 30 hours of Karting Campillos. It is going to be such a difficult task for all of these drivers. Now, I hear you listening in at home going, why 30 hours? The answer is pretty simple. Why not? A lot of the other races go 24 hours full time. Well, we're just that little bit more intense. We start at 10 o'clock in the morning, so in roughly about 10 minutes, and then we go all the way through till 4 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. We are relentless. The other thing that's going to be very interesting about this race compared to other forms of endurance karting is that, unlike other forms of racing at this level, they're actually going to do 2 different layouts of the circuit, because for the first 15 hours, the race will run clockwise. Then at 1 o'clock in the morning, the safety cart will come out, bunch up the field, make them go round the other way. So it'll be 15 hours counterclockwise. That means there's going to be 2 fastest lap awards. The fastest lap in the first 15 hours clockwise, and then the fastest lap in the second 15 hours counterclockwise. It's like no other form of karting endurance race out there. It's incredibly tough, very physical, very demanding, and as you can see, all of the drivers are motivated and ready to give us an exciting show. This is going to be such an incredible battle for all of our drivers here. Many of them competing in the overall battle, of course, but we also have a second competition within the competition. The Masters category is taking place as well, where we have an astonishing group of teams that have an average age of 45 years old with a minimal age of 25 per driver. So there are some teams going in the Masters category as well as some competing in the overall. But we have so many different classes and so many different types of race team and driver. It's going to be very difficult to predict who's going to be at the front end when the 30 hours have elapsed. But from 10 a.m. this morning all the way through till 4 p.m. tomorrow, it'll be relentless, no holds barred racing. We're going to bring you several types of coverage over the course of the weekend. We're going to be live for the first hour of the race, always the most intensive part of the race battle. We'll see lots of great duels between drivers, a lot of wheel-to-wheel. That's when it gets really physical. And then once we start the pit stop procedure, the driver changes, we'll actually do some social media interactions and some reels where we go down into the pits. We'll meet a few of the drivers in the teams, and we'll get a bit of an understanding as to the journey for them to come here to Karting Campillos. It's one of the most incredible circuits in the world, certainly one of the best endurance karting circuits in the world. And for the last 18 years, all sorts of multiple events have been coming here to put on a bit of a spectacle, including the mammoth task of bringing the World Championship of Karting here in 2021. Scene of where we saw Kia Nakamura-Berta of Japan and Tukka Tarpanen of Finland, now big names in the world of karting, become world champions. Fabulous opportunity to see how this all gets underway. One thing I also want to show you as well, this is a very family affair. The safety cart, as it were, being driven by young Jeremy Roivers, the son of the circuit owner Martin Roivers. So that's going to be really exciting to see how it all gets underway. And you're going to get to see as well, let's bring you in very quickly. We've got the driver's briefing for the competitors at the start of the race. So the race director getting in to make sure that everybody is very well aware of what's going on. We'll obviously tell you the story of the race as it plays out. We've got 30 hours, so we'll have a heck of a lot of work to do. But this is fantastic to see all of these drivers that have come through qualifying this morning, which, by the way, qualifying this morning was actually in the pitch black because the sun hadn't come up yet. So a very interesting situation for everybody. And now we get ourselves into the action. You can see the starting drivers for each team just getting a last-minute instruction from the race director as to what to do and what to expect from the first hour of the race. The first hour, of course, the most intense in regards to the wheel-to-wheel on-track battle. But of course, just getting the starting stint out of the way is only the first part of the task. And a lot of the drivers know that the race doesn't really start until 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. If you're still in the hunt for the victory within the first 12 or so laps of the leader, then you still have a very competitive chance of going for the win. Fabulous honour that young Jeremy Roivers has here of leading the field around. He'll also be the safety car driver over the course of proceedings. So a nice little honour for him to guide the field around. So it'll be nice to give him that opportunity. So much hard work going into this. The incredible organisational staff here at KartCenter Campillos, turning this into a worldwide event. This is essentially the Le Mans 24 hours of karting in terms of the intensity and the level of professionalism and the uprise of this incredible event. It's been growing and growing in stature over the last 4 seasons, but for the 5th running, it's going to be better than it's ever been before. So starting up at the front end of the grid, our starting driver in pole position is going to be Jonathan Crespo, the Spanish driver for the Creatia team. They've managed to pull off a great performance in that first port of call. It's the team from Eris Racing that got the title last year, the champions of 2022. They are going to be starting from second on the starting grid. Let's come over a little bit closer. We can see Jonathan Crespo just in conversation with the race director. He's getting himself ready to go. We have Gondamus in second position on the grid for the Eris Racing team from Switzerland. They won the job last year in 2022, and they're going to be going off second position. It's going to be such a tough order for these competitors as they will obviously start from position. They're going to be taken around in the safety car. We think it's actually a change of start position because of the weather conditions. It's not going to be the Le Mans start that I thought it was going to be, so they've actually changed the operation a little bit. But as we are now just 5 minutes from the start, it's time to head up into the commentary box, I do believe, so we can get ourselves under starters' orders. It's going to be a really exciting battle to start the race. All of these competitors are going to be pushed through the mire for the next 30 hours of motorsport. It's going to be tough, it's going to be physical, it's going to be brutal. And then around a circuit like this on these brilliant Sodi karts, all of the drivers are going to be tested. They'll have their game plans, they'll have their strategy. So now it's time to see who is going to be at the sharp end of the dais when we get ourselves under starters' orders. The 30 hours of Karting Campillos, the 5th edition in 2023. An amazing task. The team that comes through for the win in this will absolutely have earned it, both in the overall category and in the Masters class as well. So it'll be a really exciting battle as the last couple of contenders just getting themselves into the karts to start us off. And we are in the mix now, ready for the battle for the 2023 edition, the 5th running of the Karting Campillos 30 hours. I can't wait. It's going to be really exciting.
seleccionar a los pilotos para también que empiecen a rodar, ¿vale? Ok, salimos del 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, sale el safety. No está permitido en la salida adelantar antes de línea de meta. Lo que quería yo es para que verifiques que en la primera vez que pasen en línea de meta después de salir el safety, que todos estén en orden de la parrilla. Si no están en orden, va a haber penalidades, ¿vale? Safety va a salir ahí, el pico no está cerrado, va a estar, los primeros 15 minutos no pueden cambiar, es decir, que necesito saber o no.
My timing screen is still showing practice.
Sí, así está. El pit lane no tiene que estar cerrado nunca. Solo si hay el safety car en pista por razones de seguridad. Si no, el safety ahora va a salir y el pit está abierto, pero los pilotos no pueden cambiar en los primeros 15 minutos. O sea, en los primeros 15 minutos no puede haber display, hay una penalidad.
We're into the rolling lap of the KartCenter Campillos 30 hours, one of the toughest, most brutal endurance karting races in the world, certainly one of the longest. 30 hours of the course. Why 30? Well, it's certainly a heck of a lot more of a task than a 24-hour race would be. We don't do 6, we don't do 12, we don't do 24, we do 30 hours. It's the 5th running of this particular race, and of course it's going to be a very tough mission for the competitors out there, with 15 hours in one direction clockwise, and then the second 15 hours counterclockwise in the running of this race. So at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, we are going to have a complete change of direction. The safety cart coming around the course now to lead the 42 teams around in what is promising to be a sensational battle around this course of the KartCenter Campillos. It is great to be here once again, the venue for the FIA Karting World Championship 2021. 2 years ago, it was Tukka Tarpanen of Finland and Kia Nakamura of Japan that were crowned the senior and junior world champions on this very circuit, in very similar conditions, I have to say, as the safety cart led by Jeremy Roivers peels out and the drivers go around the course on their formation laps, and we are into the start once again. The cart's running around the course as we get ourselves up to a starting procedure at the KartCenter Campillos. 30 hours and the battle is running through off the start. Competitors running their way through, slipping and sliding in the opening phase of the race. This is when things get particularly tricky out there, and very fast competitive racing already getting under starters' orders. We had a good start from the Eris Pro team that were up there in the higher echelons of the race, but you can see just how tricky it is for Great. A spin there in 3rd position as the drivers are already struggling to get themselves up to fast speed. But it's a very greasy condition that we have out there on the course. It's going to be very difficult to see how everybody is going to keep it together.
but a very tricky scenario still progressing as everybody is getting themselves up to fast start. But we are under starters orders for the 30-hour Carrera, the 30 hours of karting Campillos and the Asphalt Nights. Oh, contact for the lead already, and a spin as off the road. Several lead changes. Everybody's struggling to get the karts turned in down the hill, and we've had 2 or 3 karts there get swamped in. There's so little room for manoeuvring here, as the competitors are having a very tricky start to things. But the 30 hours of Campillos is underway, and certainly from the start of the race, the Asphalt Knights of Luis de Art has had a bit of a tough stop of it from the Asphalt Kart squad. But as the field works their way through on this opening lap, the 30 hours of Campillos 2023 already having an electrifying start. No Le Mans start this year because of the greasy conditions. We didn't want people to fall over on the run to the car, but certainly a very tricky scenario. Young Jeremy Roivers having worked the field around on the opening lap. Look how tricky the conditions are in this opening lap. The rain that came down last night causing all sorts of problems. But the Asphalt Knights, the Baguettes drivers and the Oficial racing team working their way through at the front end of the field. So many drivers struggling on this opening lap. A couple of drivers actually running off the road. I think that might have been the crew from the Mamdi karting team having their problems. But through at the end of the first lap, it is the Asphalt Knights of Luis Duarte that leads the way from John Del Valle, the Spanish driver, in second position, working their way through on this opening part of the lap. As everybody finishes up, a couple of drivers having to take to the grass off the final turn. So already things are pretty hectic on the start of this race at the KartCenter Campillos 2023, the 30 hours. A very brutal race indeed is expected here, and it's going to just continue to be so for the entirety of 40 karts that are out there battling away. Luis Duarte in front of John Del Valle, and then Jonathan Crespo, third position in the run. I think that's actually changed hands because Crespo looks to have managed to make his way through past John Del Valle. And Jonathan Crespo was the original pole position starter in the Criata racing team, but they're now in third position, or at least they were when they came across the line. But the Baguettes drivers team trying to work their way into a strong position as well in kart number 2. Is that the kart that actually leads the race? It is. So they have changed hands. So Baguettes and Criatia have managed to work their way forward. So the Criatia team, along with the Baguettes drivers, have worked their way forward. Look, there's still a lot of slipping and sliding on the opening couple of laps of the course. There's the 21. That is the Oficial racing team crew, just trying to get the car pointed in. There's absolutely no grip at the moment. And a big slide. They're going to go to the side of the Oficial team. Now, who is that spinning around? We've already had a big moment on the first couple of laps, and there's more to it. When there's rain at Campillos, it gets very greasy, very slippery. I think that was Victor Sparholt, the Danish driver, that went into the side there of Marcus Sonoda. So initial problems there on the opening lap. Several drivers having their problems. It was indeed the Team Stark car, the number 19, that went around there and ended up losing quite a lot of ground. There's still karts going off in the middle of the road as well. These wet conditions definitely splitting the pack up. So it's going to be a very tricky race battle as they come through out of the final turn and onto the home straight. It's the number 2 that leads the way for the Baguettes team. John Del Valle is your leading driver at the moment, in front of Luis Duarte and Jonathan Crespo. Then Sibert Fali, Marcus Sonoda and Victor Sparholt. They're still having a very good run of it. But the Team Stark, the Danish team, have now actually dropped down to 10th position after all of that slipping and sliding. There's the battle further up. There's the number 1 kart, the Eris Pro team that won last year, sliding around. That's a power sliding racing kart at the moment, hopping over the curbs. That's not the racetrack, I think you'll find. And manages to get through on the inside. That's Thomas Condaminas, the Swiss driver, getting up the inside of Marcus Sonoda, who gets back on the inside of Sonoda. They're running right around the outside in the hope that they'll hold on to this position. That's the winning team from last year, don't forget, trying to assert themselves on the inside line. But Marcus Sonoda still has good traction off the turn, though. He's going to let the Eris Pro kart go through there. So the number 1 manages to now assert itself back into the top 5 once again, but the back end power sliding big time. These will be very different driving conditions to what we saw in the race battle, the race build-up in the practice sessions yesterday. As the dry circuit, this place is ridiculously fast, but the lap times we're getting yesterday were about a 1 minute 23, and today they're in the 2 minute 6s. That's how much rain went down last night. So the track is completely different to what it was. There is Jonathan Crespo in the Criatia team, third position, being caught and chased down by the squad from Eris Sport. That's the sister team for the squad that won last year, of course. and Sibert Verfaeli, who is trying to close up on him to make the overtaking move. But it's the number 2 of John Del Valle in the Paquetes drivers team that is currently leading the race in front of the Asphalt Knights. In the number 5, the Portuguese team overshooting. Look how far, just off the road, these guys are practically going. And that is off the road for Jonathan Crespo as he goes drifting big time there. And the Creatia team still running in the top 3, but really struggling to keep the kart on the road as they come off the final turn to complete the 3rd lap of racing. We're already over 6 minutes into this race. That shows you how slow the lap is at this point in proceedings. It's going to be a very slow running of the first hour. But certainly the Paquetes drivers team, currently captained at the wheel by John Del Valle, is leading the race in front of the Asphalt Knights. There is the crew running in 2nd place, the team from Portugal, who are there in 2nd position, trying to close up on our race leaders, using so much curve, and you have to if you want to get the car turned in. Luis Duarte in 2nd position, in front of Jonathan Crespo in the Creatia team. Then Sibert Verfaeli, Marcos Sanuda, Thomas Godaminas, Maxime Di Matteo, and then Victor Martin from François Axel. They were in the 9th position team for Team TFD. The Track Limits Sport team for Portugal have actually crept their way into 10th position of late. So still some good performances out there from our drivers. The Ares Racing team have had a bit of a moment out there on the course. They've slipped back to 32nd position now, having initially been right up there in the head of the top 25. That was Jose Francisco Gonzalez, who had a bit of a moment there, the Swiss team. But John Del Valle is the driver that is currently leading the way for the Paquetes drivers team, but he's going to have some pressure. This is currently the Asphalt Knights being hunted down by Jonathan Crespo in the Creatia team. So Duarte versus Crespo battling for 2nd position. There is Crespo, 3rd position in the Creatia team. Looking for a very solid run at this point in the proceedings, leaning in. The one thing about the wet conditions, of course, is that the circuit is not going to be quite as physical in the first hour with the wet conditions as it was earlier on in the weekend. So it's just more about driver skill than it is about the brute physicality of keeping these karts hanging. But there's only a handful of corners on the circuit where you actually need to apply the brakes in the dry conditions. In the wet, you'll barely be on them because you'll basically be using momentum to try and get the kart around. It'll be a lot of throttle play. We are trying your best to sort of edge yourself into a position. And Sibert Verfaeli in the Ares Sport team, 4th position, very nearly chucking it away there in 4th position. You've got to run so far over the line. And interestingly, I noticed that Marcos Sanuda in the Astor Celta racing team, car number 21, has managed to single-seaters, GTs, touring cars. They'll come back here to continue to sharpen their skills. It's not easy to win in this, and it really does eliminate the egos from the racing world. It doesn't matter how much money you've got, it doesn't matter what your credence is, what your reputation, what you've won before. Put up or shut up on a race circuit like this. It's all about feel, it's all about driver skill and mentality, and you really have to put on a good show to win. So the Paquetes drivers team out in 1st position on their 5th lap, having already had a very good start to proceedings. Not easy to be competitive on this circuit, that is for sure. And everybody obviously working themselves into a good position to try and get the most out of it. There is the battle still continuing between the Asphalt Knights and Creatia as they run in the battle for 2nd position. Kart number 5 and kart number 6 battling over 2nd place at the moment, with the number 4 team from Ares Sport running in 4th position. What's happening in the Masters category? Well, we need to keep an eye on that because any of the karts who are in number 35 or higher are in the Masters category. And currently the leading Masters crew is the number 40 Team TFD with Axel Francoeur currently at the wheel. They're in 8th position at the moment, quite a long way ahead of the nearest Masters crew, which is the number 35 of the MRT Motorsport team from Spain, currently running in 20th position. And then 3rd at the moment in Masters is the Danish team FH Auto, the number 41 car. They're currently in 23rd. So still a long way to go. We're not even half an hour into this 30-hour Karting Campillos race, and still a lot can happen over the course of proceedings. 1,588 metres this race circuit. Plenty to do. You can see the shuffle of the deck in this battle further back, can't you? Because these two teams have changed positions again. It's Ares Pro and Astor Celta, and in fact they've both been overtaken by the BKRT team, the Belgian team. They're currently running in 5th position, so they've worked their way forward. So very good work there indeed from the number 32, the BKRT team. Look at the difference in line that these teams are taking. Some straight lining the curves, some are just trying to power slide it through, and it's Maxime Di Matteo, the Belgian driver, in 5th position now, having worked his way past Thomas Godaminas and Marcos Sanuda. And I noticed as well that the Team TFD, the leading Masters team of Axel Francoeur, they are right in behind as well. So this is going to be very spicy indeed for 5th position onwards, as these 4 crews are going to be mixing it for position. And the Team TFD squad are right there in 8th position, trying to move forward, with Track Limits Sport of Portugal having just overtaken the Benicarts team. So that's Edouard Coumont having got past Victor Martin. So there is the running at the moment from the timing screen. You can see the Paquetes drivers team currently running in 1st position in front of the Asphalt Knights and Creatia. You'll also notice which drivers are currently in the seat at the moment as well, because that will also come up on the screen. A fabulous performance so far from our competitors up at the front end. It is the battle for 2nd place between the Asphalt Knights and Creatia as they run together in close proximity. Luis Duarte and Jonathan Crespo, the drivers, in 2nd and 3rd position at the moment. A very tough race battle still to come from all of our contenders. And diving up the inside, that's Crespo trying to get the move there on the inside of Duarte. And they still run side by side off the turn. They're going to get very close to each other. Duarte is going to protect the inside line from the next hairpin. They're going to go very deep through the apex. And the Creatia team still trying to get through into 3rd place with Jonathan Crespo coming off the turn. And Luis Duarte still holding it as they come down the main straight. Duarte and Crespo. Asphalt Knights versus Creatia still dueling away as they continue to make incredible progress of things. In through turn 1, look at the lean angle they've got to take as they lean into the left-hand side of the cart as they turn right, just so that they can get the balance of transfer of weight to a more even keel. And that's the first of the slower carts in front of them that they're going to lap. That is Amelia Racing, the 42. Got to be very careful how they work their way past it. They actually nudge the back of the Amelia Racing cart. That's not helpful at all for the pace of the Creatia team. That's really dropped them off the pace. So they need to get back into it again. But the traffic is going to play its part in this race, of course. How you get through the traffic is very dependent on how your stint continues on. So the Amelia Racing team getting out of the way as sharp as possible. But a bit of a headache then for our race leaders, and certainly for the 2 or 3 carts trying to follow in formation. It was Thomas Quintanguien who was having to get out of the way, hopping over the curves and running very deep into the hairpin to try and get the turn in. There is no real racing line in these wet and greasy conditions. You just got to play it by ear and hope that you got it right. So Duarte just looking in behind him again in the hope that Jonathan Crespo is not too far behind him. You've really got to try something pretty tough. Look how drifty the car gets into that far side of the hairpin. Once you get onto the green painted runoff area, things get very slippery because you don't run over that in terms of the race battle. We've got a spinner there in the middle of the gaggle, so somebody's had a bit of an off. We'll try and pick up on who that is, but it looks like we've got one of the midfielders having a bit of a headache just before the end of the first sector. I noticed that it's been a bit of a slow first sector for the MRT Motorsport team on that particular lap through, but that car looked like it was still stationary for a little bit. So I can't quite make out who it is that we lost there, but I think the MRT Motorsport team maybe a little bit of a slow one. So maybe it was them that just drifted off the road fractionally. Isaías Savayan Vega, the driver behind the wheel. Still Duarte versus Crespo. No problems at all for the man up front to continue to pull away. 2:05.852. Fastest lap of the race. Going nearly 2 seconds a lap quicker than anybody else. So the leaders are just checking out and having a fantastic run. But Duarte and Crespo having a great duel for 2nd position. Asphalt Knights versus Creatia. Portugal versus Spain. Luis Duarte versus Jonathan Crespo. They're trying to get well clear of the Ares Sport team. Sibet Fevali currently running in 4th position, the Swiss driver. Look at them almost running onto the gravel as they come through the hairpin there. Now, it looks like we've had our first pit stops. Benicarts and DTS both coming into the pits then. So pit stops for Benicarts and DTS. They both come into the pits, and I thought the WRW team from Belarus did the same thing as well, but they have not done so. They've just lost the position. But certainly in the pits, we have Victor Martin and Jose Maria Savayan Vega making their way into the pits for their first pit stops. Driver changes. Boris Martin Gomez has come into the pits as well for the number 29 crew. That's the EDK Endurance team. So we're already having our first pit stops. Watching out for Jonathan Crespo as he still follows in behind Luis Duarte. Now when we say pit stops, it's little more than a driver change, of course. So when the competitors get back up onto the circuit again, they are literally... Oh, bit of an off there for Luis Duarte as he runs in front of Jonathan Crespo. Got to be so careful. And if you're Crespo as well, you've got to be careful that you don't just go hungry and dive up the inside and make the move. You've got to make sure the car can still turn in. So it's not a rush. You can't afford to throw these things away just by being eager. You've got to really be balanced and calculated. Also into the pits, I know, has come the Mold Racing team from Moldova. The number 14 kart it is that has come into the pits for the pit stop as well. So that is Mold Racing crew. And the driver behind the wheel of that was Merten Brand. It's now changed over to Nicholas Kruger. And we've also had some changes again at the number 18. So Mario Santos has now got behind the wheel of the Benekarts team. Great that we have the change of driver as they make their pit stops. It's going to be very good to be able to see how the balance of the race plays out in real time. And there's an off at the hairpin there, as into the pits comes the number 6. So the Creatia team following in the Asphalt Knights. So they come into the pits together. Oh, and a few karts dropping off and having a little bit of a slip up there as well. Got to be very careful in the very damp and greasy conditions of these courses. You've got to be very meticulous about how you go about these different driving styles. Benekarts and DTS have come into the pits and gone out again. The Astor Celta and Track Limits Sport team chose this lap to come into the pits as well. So obviously they're in for a certain point. Now here we go. This is what happens when you get the pit stop. The driver will get out of the car. There is refueling, because obviously they've not been refueled since yesterday. So the tank is topped up to the brim, and then they will go again, and that tank will probably give them quite a bit of life within the car. Oh, now what's happening there? We've had somebody trying to come through at a different point of the course by the look of it. Yes, somebody tried to go through the escape road, and they've not come in the correct point. So they tried to go through under the hatchings, and you can't do that in the pit stops during the race itself. You come in behind that particular point into the service bay. Because into the pits comes the number 1 kart, that is Thomas Condomines, who came in, and that's very exciting for us. It definitely makes telling the story a lot easier to comprehend. So Luis Fernandez and Nelson Desplat will now get back into the karts for the teams from Alpha Knights and Creatia. And also you'll see there some metal blocks being taken out there. Those are the ballast weights. Each driver is responsible for their own ballast weights. So the different colours will denote different weights, and obviously they have to make sure that they meet the minimum requirement of 85 kilos. So that's 85 kilos with cart and driver, of course. So you have to make sure that that all goes according to plan. Some drivers don't carry ballast. Some of the lighter drivers, of course, have to make sure that they meet the minimum weight requirements. And the driver is responsible for that task. Now, of course, when you get out of your cart, you take your transponder with you. You get out of one kart and you get assigned another one, so everybody gets the chance to race in different karts. You don't keep the same kart all the way through the race. So it's by the transponder that you run through, not the actual machinery. Now that's also quite important to know, because it keeps things nice and even balanced and very equal for the contenders. There's great fleets of karts, but you get assigned a different kart when you head out onto the circuit again. All of the mechanics, they look after the karts exactly the same way. So at various points through the race you'll get a good kart, and then you might get a different handling car all the way through the course of it. But the disparity between the fastest kart in the fleet and the lowest kart in the field is only about 1.1, 1.2 seconds maximum. And in the wet conditions, that's not even really comparable. So fascinating to see. Is now Germain Sanchez Flor will get into the number 2 kart, because they've come into the pits from the lead. But it's nice to know that the teams are not only going to have different drivers, they're also going to have different karts to race with over the course of this race. It keeps it nice and evenly balanced, and it means that with the incredible fleet of karts we've got, of over 50 karts in the race, you're always going to be able to swap out and choose a different car. Look at the difference in the lines that these guys are taking. Some going very wide, some hopping over the curbs, some even straight lining the curbs in order to get the turn in. But even in the dry, you know, these rental karts in general, most rental karts have a tendency to understeer, and you've really got to know how to balance the brake and the throttle to get them to turn in. So in the wet it's even worse, because they're all on slick tyres. You don't get wet tyres when it rains in this sport. You've got to stay on the slicks, so it makes it very difficult to control, and therein lies a lot of the skill and the difficulty. Now what this means now with the pit stops that we've had from the likes of Creatia, Asphalt Knights and the Paquetes team, is the team that now leads the way is the Erez Sport team, driven by Sibet Favali at the moment. They've kept out on the circuit for a time being, with the leaders having pulled out 25 seconds on them in the first few laps of racing. And don't forget, we haven't even completed 10 laps of racing up to this point. We're on lap 10 now, but coming up towards the end of the first half hour. Obviously the greasy conditions make it very hard, and there's a lot of pit stops to come in this race, as we've got a lot of wheel-to-wheel drama, a lot of good banter around the circuit. Maxime de Matteo has now moved up into second position, the Belgian driver, in front of Axel Francoeur, as the two teams are now squabbling over second position. That's the teams from BKRT and Team TFD. Ares Pro have come into the pits as well now, the reigning champs. So they come into the pits, the Swiss-backed team. And the Ares Pro team from Switzerland, who were the champions last year, now battling for the victory. They come in fourth position. You see the drivers battling away. Oh, careful guys, keep out of the way of each other. Try not to pinch each other off at the hairpin there at the bottom of the course. And be so careful about where you turn in. It's not easy in greasy conditions. And the drivers working very hard to get themselves into a good position and keep it nice and tidy off the final turn. Oh, over the curbs. Bit of a mistake there from the 33, I think it was, running a little bit deep. That's the car that we saw come in a little bit earlier on for position. That's Julie Motul, I think, who is now behind the wheel, the Belgian driver. Look at the difference of the driving lines as everybody boxes in with each other. Some going wide, some dropping over the curbs, others wanting to cut across. This is really tough stuff. Got to learn about where the grip is, and different drivers will have different opinions about where to find the grip, depending on their experience, depending on their comfort levels, depending on the style of their driving. It's so different to experience in the greasy conditions. And look, you get a lot of sliding left and right from drivers who are just trying to get some traction down. Julie Motul getting a little bit squeezed there as she comes through the full gas by BKRT squad, but they managed to get themselves back up to speed again. And I notice that both the Ares teams are in the pits together, the number 20 Ares Racing and the number 38, the Ares Master Racing team. So they've got a team in the overall category and a team in the Masters category as well. 40 teams in the race. Still having a great battle out there around the course. And of course we have still some great battles to come from everybody as they continue to give us plenty of excitement around the field. But we're going to have some truly exciting battles from competitors as they continue to chop forward. Ares Sport in the number 4 car, still giving us plenty of excitement out there. Now creeping up into the top 10 for British fans watching the race, it's the number 25 crew, the Northwest Karting team. Tommy Lee currently at the wheel of that particular kart in the top 10. Whoops, that's going straight off the road. Now, who was that we just lost dropping through there? Big moment. One of the competitors, fortunately, was only short-lived. But no, the Northwest Karting team, who were actually absent from the opening ceremony yesterday, they decided they wanted to go to bed early and just give themselves a little bit of extra rest. And it seems to have worked, because they're now right up in the top 10, trying to battle their way further forward. So Sibert Vervaarle continues in the lead of this race. He wants to just continue the upbeat and the pace. Oh, coming out of the pits, we've had Juan Francisco Esteban, that's the MRT Motorsport car number 35, I think, coming out of the pits, and then chopping across the rivals that are going through with them. Amazing, isn't it? From one corner to the next, who's got the momentum, who's got the upper hand? Just swapping positions. One gets the momentum, goes in front of the other, then get them back on the throttle. They swap over once again. It's very tough to know who's going to have the run of the momentum as they come through. Down in the pit lane, you can see the drivers getting ready for the changeover, and all of the ballast boxes for all of the drivers as they come through as well. And there's conversations going in between the drivers. They're going to be at this for a very long time, as there is operations man Sergio continuing his run around the course, just making sure that everything is neat and tidy. The PLK Endurance Squad getting ready there. The PLK Sport team currently running in 11th position with the driver Carlos Cordoba still having a very solid race of it. Looks like they're getting ready for a driver change. And there are the drivers on the left-hand side of your screen, as well as the team names. So you'll get to know who is behind the wheel at any one time when that screen comes up. The top 15 teams are the ones that are together. And into the pits has come the CVK's Savarkar squad, the number 11 team. So they have come into the pits for a driver change. That's going to change over quickly. It's Luis Puig that was behind the wheel. I think that's now about to change over. But Sibert Vervaarle, the Swiss driver, currently your race leader for the Ares Sport team. out in front of BKRT, and the Team TFD, right, the leading Masters team, is just coming to the pits. So that's Axel Francoeur coming into the pits. And that will change hands then for the leaders in possibly both the Masters and the top three, because obviously TFD will come into the pits before Team Stark and Team Acing Auto Racing, and that will hand the likes of Victor Sparholt and Christian Schumi-Jessen, I should say, a chance to move forward. And Schumi, as he's known in the Acing Auto Racing Pro Team, will now be firmly there in the top five. But the CVKS Summer Car Squad have made their pit stop and brought their kart back out onto the circuit again. And there'll be a different driver behind the wheel of that particular machine, of course, as well, tumbling down the timesheets. But that is, I think it is Lewis Boyce who is now behind the wheel, I should say. There is the FH Auto and Acing Auto Racing Pro teams, both from Denmark, getting themselves ready, weighing in, making sure that they are in the operations in the correct position. They've got to make sure that they weigh, make sure they carry the correct amount of ballast before they go back out onto the circuit again to replace their teammate. But it's a great shuffle of the deck in the opening phase of proceedings. The Ares teams have ended up dropping all the way to the back of the grid because of their pit stops, but so far we've only had about half the field make pit stops. Not everybody has yet. We'll be able to monitor that if you're following along on the Karting Campillos timing screens as well. You can do that by heading to the website kartingcampillos.com. You can follow everything that goes on through the course of the 30 hours. It's great to see. And if you're looking at this thinking, well, I know 2 or 3 guys are very quick behind a kart, we can race this. Well, what about getting on the grid in 2024 for the event? 30 hours is very brutal indeed. It's a lot tougher than a lot of the other endurance races in the mix, but it's great to see these guys battling away. Oh, tripping over there. That's one of the midfielders just finding the limits of where the kart can and can't turn in on the climb back up the hill. And we're looking at a replay of that. It's difficult because the kart washes out at that point, and you've just got to follow it where it's heading for, and you just wrestle with it once it gets onto the gravel. The fortune of being in the wet conditions means that the kart just naturally travels to the point, and as long as you hang on off the throttle and off the brakes, you don't have a crash. You just follow the trajectory of where the kart is going, but you can guide it into a decent enough position to be relatively comfortable. Into the pits comes the Acing Auto Racing Pro kart. That is Schumi-Jessen. So Schumi comes into the pits. Christian to his beloved fans, of course. Still they slide around, battling away. In close proximity as always, over the start-finish line again. Your race leader, Sibet Fafali, holds the advantage by just 0.4 of a second to Maxime de Matteo, who is there in second position in the number 32 car. 4 versus 32. They've come through relatively together in position. So the 4 and the 32, 0.4 of a second between them as they battle away for the victory. Neither kart having come into the pits yet. They've just gone through sector 2, so they'll be in the 3rd sector of the course now as they head their way through the far end of the course. So we'll have to wait and see where they are. Now here in the pit lane we've got the FH Auto team having a pit stop. That's the number 41 crew. It'll be Finn Hansen that now gets behind the wheel of that, taking over from Schumi. So still a good battle. Now we're going to try and pick up the leaders as they come across the start-finish line very shortly indeed. As the Aero Sport and BKR team karts, they now come over the start-finish line. So they're heading to turn 1, the 2 leaders. And then we're going up the hill for turn 2. Now the driver just scans his wrist as he goes past the gate there. That's to let everybody know that he's done his stop and he's going back out onto the circuit again. He stops there at the point and waits until the minimum time has been completed, because you have to stay in the pits for a minimum quantity of time. Now it is Sport and BKRT, 4 and 32, currently separated by 0.4 of a second. Not much to choose between them. There is the kart heading back out onto the circuit again for the FH Auto team. They've now dropped out of the top 10, of course. They have to stay there for the mandatory minimum pit stop time, which is 2 minutes. So every team has to come into the pits and stay there for 2 minutes, and then they head out onto the course again. And it's perfecting that to a fine art, because obviously, oh, and a spin straight away out of the pits for Finn Hansen. That's very easily done when you get out onto the circuit for the first time. As Finn Hansen just turns his way through the left, the back end steps out, and he was very lucky indeed to catch that actually, but it's so easily done when you leave the pits and get straight back onto the circuit again. So Finn Hansen jumping straight into the FH Auto kart, and and it's to be expected really. If you're going to have an off, it's going to happen on your out lap when you're desperately trying to get yourself back up to speed again. So not easy to see how that all balances itself out. Now here is the battle for the victory between the two leading karts, 4 and 32, Aris Sport and BKRT, as they run down the hill. And the BKRT team squad in 32, driven by Maxime Di Matteo, trying to make his bid on the inside of Sibert Verfali. Sibert Verfali travelling over the curb. Di Matteo trying to get up the inside, squeak through on the inside as they bang side pods there. Is that going to be enough to take the lead? It is. BKRT taking the lead of the Campillos 30 hours then. They've got some big traffic in front of them. 3 cars scrapping away in the lower end. So it's going to be a new leader. There it is. Maxime Di Matteo, the Belgian driver, has just taken the lead of the race for BKRT. Oh, apparently not. Apparently they haven't swapped positions yet. So it must be another driver that they were battling away with there. The number 4 is actually just up the road in front of them. So my apologies. I assumed the overtaking move they'd made was on number 4. It wasn't. It was on a back marker. So they're working their way through the traffic very steadily. But this is where the race is really won and lost, isn't it? Dealing with the traffic around you. So the number 4 car is still in the mix there. The Aris Sport team now 8/10 of a second clear in the lead of the race. There they are, just trying to mix their way through. And there's the number 32 of Maxime Di Matteo, still running in second position for the moment. But obviously this all comes down to how you balance the way you work your way through the traffic in the close proximity. Very tricky in the opening phase. So a 2-minute pit stop is the minimum time you're allowed in pit lane. FH Auto completed that in 2:03. KST1 did it in 2:02. Andres Ramos Timosic is still trying to get the number 27 kart out onto the circuit again while he waits in pit lane. And that's for the BLK Endurance team, so they're trying to get themselves back up to scratch again. KST1, the French team, currently on the 7th position as they work their way through. Bit of a squabble of the deck. Is that the move from Di Matteo? This time I think that might be the move from the BKRT to get through on the Aris Sport team. Yes, it is. That is the Aris Sport team car. Verfali in second position now. So it's a bit of a method to get through into the lead. I want to see that again, actually, how they managed to battle away, because now Verfali's going to try and make the dive back up the inside to go for the lead of the race. Dives through into the hairpin. Can he get the car turned in and stopped? That's where it's going to really count. They're all going to drift wide, and it's going to be very close on the exit. They've got a car tripping them over. Maxime Di Matteo trying to get him off his back, and they're still racing side by side, these two, Aris Sport and BKRT. But at least they're able to rejoin the battle without too much drama and conflict. They come off the final turn, and it's still the number 4, the Aris Sport machine of Sibert Verfali, and Maxime Di Matteo, the Belgian, in second position. Running in first and second places now, these two cars. So here they are, into the first corner, up to the inside line. BKRT, 32, trying to get through on the inside of the Aris Sport team. At the top of the field they come again. They've had to separate a little bit now because Maxime Di Matteo wasn't quite able to get the move on the inside of Sibert Verfali after all. But after making his first move, making his first bit, it hasn't quite worked out. Here they come together. Here we are, Maxime Di Matteo closing up on the number 4. As the back marker just in front of them there. They've got a little bit of breathing space to watch these two karts come together. Now what can Maxime Di Matteo do? He's caught up on the top of the hill. We're just watching the kart in front of them. That's the back marker. That's the karts behind that we really need to be keeping an eye on. Who is this particular kart that we're watching? That is the number 6 machine, though. So they've managed to get past and overtake. That's the Creatia team. So it's quite important that they've got themselves unlapped, because when these two karts make their pit stop, of course, they'll be the ones they're racing against for positions. So it's quite important to keep an eye on the number 6, the Creatia team. So I'm glad we're watching them, because obviously when the pit stops happen for the 4 and 32, that's who they'll be racing against when they come out of the pits. So quite important that we keep that in perspective. So Sibert Verfali, still your race leader. Maxime Di Matteo in the chase behind them. The number 6 kart is the Creatia team that we're watching on screen, and that is currently being driven. It was at the start of the race, it was driven by Jonathan Crespo. But there's now been a pit stop since then, and so Jonathan Crespo has handed the Creatia team run over to Nelson Desplat. So we are watching Nelson Desplat in front of Sibert Verfali as they continue to duel their way through at the final stage of the course. And into the pits. Here we go, pit stop. Now, who is that coming in first and foremost? I think that might be the number 4 of the Ares Sport team making the first pit stop. No, in fact, it was one of the other back markers. So I thought that might have been Ares Sport or BKRT, but it wasn't either team. So neither crew coming into the pits at this point. Still racing out in front, still keeping it nicely planted and still going together. Now into the pits we've had a couple of other teams come in. Now there is another of the Creatia team getting ready to go out. So are we going to see another pit stop at Creatia? Well, that's Jonathan Crespo getting ready to go out again by the look of it. And that is Massar of the BKRT squad, the Belgian team. Very important to make sure that you still weigh the correct amount with the right amount of ballast. Got to make sure you meet that minimum. So there is the number 6 currently being driven by Nelson Desplat, trying to stay in front of the overall leaders and not be lapped, because that will really help him when they make their pit stop. Because as long as he stays within about 2 minutes of the pace, he'll have the chance to come through and make another bit. Oh, and a little bit of contact there with one of the slower karts. That's really going to halt the progress of the BKR team squad driver Maxime de Matteo. Just caught the side of one of the back markers. That's really going to give a little bit of a breather to the team up in front, the Ares Sport team of Simon Fafali. That gives them a little bit of a breathing space now, because the loss in momentum is definitely going to hurt and hamper the progress. It's one of the Sally's team drivers in front of the number 6 of Nelson Desplat. Now that is going to be a nice clean overtake, and they might just get the move to go down the inside of the WRW2 squad of Vova Khorasan as well. And going drifting onto the hairpin. So easily done when you're being intimidated by another car. Just to catch a little bit of the grass, catch a little bit of the gravel, you've got to be very careful about where you place the machine. So a very tricky race battle for the competitors out there. They're doing a great job, it has to be said, of keeping these karts on the road. But up in front, the number 4, the Ares Sport team, has got himself a little bit of breathing space now over Maxime de Matteo in the BKRT team. It was dropped to 1.2 seconds and then dropped again to 3.1 seconds deficit thanks to the off just a little while ago. Maxime de Matteo was trying to stay in touch with Simon Fafali, but it's not easy. It's not easy at any point in this race. You're going to get so many different variables keeping drivers off the top of the rankings. But certainly for the moment, Maxime de Matteo keeping the Ares Sport as in sight as physically possible. You've got to be careful not to trip over back markers at this point, because that's where your race really can come unstuck. In the greasy conditions, you're at a reasonable advantage because you're not anybody really pushing each other too hard. In these early conditions, you're just trying to stay in a competitive position. You want to keep yourself as far in the top 5 as possible. 41 seconds back from the leading crew is Team Stark, the Danish team that are currently running in 3rd position. So there's a lot of time to gain, but at the same time there's also a lot of time to lose. There's Maxime de Matteo getting up the inside of one of the back markers. There's the number 4 of Simon Fafali getting held up as well. And there's a problem. It's Maxime de Matteo has had an issue with the number 29, I think it was, veering into the side of them. So a big issue there for the EDK Endurance team, as they had a big twitch and drifted into the side of Maxime de Matteo. More problems into the hairpin as well. Several other karts squabbling and having problems. And look at this, Maxime de Matteo even having to put one wheel on the grass just to get the thing to turn in through the right-hand hairpin. Very tricky and greasy conditions to settle all this stuff out. But everybody's still putting on a great display and a very tough and candid show out there. So the battle's still raging here at Karting Campillos for the 30-hour, the 5th edition of this incredible race. The toughest endurance race of them all in karting. 24 hours is one thing, 30 hours, well, that's just insanity. That's what we like about it. Just pushes the drivers and the teams just that little bit more. Once you complete the 24-hour mark, great, you've still got another 6-hour race on top of that. And of course, at the 15-hour mark, which will be 1 o'clock in the morning, the teams will actually swap the layouts. They'll get the safety car, bunching them all up, and then they will be followed around the course. And I think it's going to be through pit lane and then back out the other side, so that we can have the second 15 hours of racing running the circuit in reverse. So the first 15 hours are clockwise, the second 15 hours are counterclockwise. One of the unique circuits in the world that can do that. Not every circuit can do that, of course, but certainly Karting Campillos has been set up so that you can have it in two different directions if you need to. It's why the practice sessions were running in the two different directions of the course yesterday as well. All good preparation, all a good chance to continue the climb and move the way further forward. But certainly for the Ares Sport team, who are still not pitting, in fact we've only had a handful of teams that haven't made their first pit stop. We've even got teams out there that have made their second. Looking in particular at the team from Croatia, they've made a second pit stop, but Jonathan Crespo has got back into the kart again. They've got more drivers than that, but clearly looking at the pace lost in the greasy conditions, you have to shake up the tactics a little bit and try and go for something a little bit different. If something isn't working, you have to be quite fluid and quite diverse with how you make the strategy come to you. You lose time now if you make too many pit stops, but it can come back to you in the second half of the running. Eduardo Comort and Victor Martin have got back into their karts as well, actually. Having done a short stint with another teammate, they've got back into the kart again. So it's still not done and dusted yet. There's a lot of things that can still happen. I think you're going to see multiple teams running up in the top three over the course of racing, but it's certainly a good feather in the cap for Ares Sport, for BKRT and for Team Stark. Northwest Racing, the British team, find themselves in fourth position in front of the German team from Grisa. That's Tommy Lee and Tomas Silvan, who are having an interesting conversation with each other there. Off the road, and a couple of drivers drifting off. There is Maxime Di Matteo for the BKRT squad. Now, they've been progressively losing some time. The gap is now 4.6 seconds between them and the leading crew, the number 4 in the Ares Sport team. So there's not a lot of close proximity then, as the contenders are still putting on a really good showcase. But a very tough battle for everybody as we still continue this incredible run. And the drivers are still giving us a lot of good action out there on the course. Bit of a slide or two from the drivers in the mix, but the Ares Sport and BKRT squads still mixing it in the battle for the victory. You've got to be careful if you're Ares Sport and the team up front. You've got to be very careful when you pick your moment to get through on the back markers. You don't want to cause big issues by blocking the boat or having issues, but certainly Sibet Vefali is taking his time about getting through the back markers. He's got a bit of time to play with. You can see that. Look, he's not just storming up the inside and wondering what the consequences are going to be, because in karting the consequences of slipping off the road in the wet conditions are actually very, very difficult indeed to cope with. So there is the number 6 having returned to the circuit. I think that's the number 6 anyway, of Jonathan Crispo. They want to swap things up a little bit of a tank style, a bit of a power slide. You've got to be careful you don't slip into other drivers. I certainly would be one of the drivers in that category, spinning around all over the place. But you do get a flavour of just how intense and exciting the race is going to continue to get as it builds from hour to hour. What's going to be a real tipping point in the race for me is 1 o'clock in the morning, when they switch from clockwise to counterclockwise. All the teams and the drivers have obviously worked on their strategy and taken it together in the mix of which way is the faster way round. I noticed actually in the practice yesterday in the dry that the counterclockwise lap times seem to be about a second or so slower than the clockwise counterparts. Now I'm not sure which it is, which part of the course it is that makes the circuit a little bit slower going that way, but it certainly, for me personally, presents the ultimate challenge. You know, you can be great at a circuit going in one direction. Driving the same circuit in the other direction does not make it the same circuit. It's a completely different style of driving. Maxime Di Matteo having to slice his way through the back markers, millimetre precision, before coming into contact with the driver you're lapping. You've really got to make this balancing act work very well for you. It's got to be very fluid, it's got to be very open. But these greasy conditions have definitely made it pretty tricky in the opening phases of the race. But we still have a handful of teams that have yet to make pit stops. Anybody in the top 9 hasn't made a pit stop so far, and then there are only, to my maths, 3 other karts that haven't pitted. So there is a grand total of 12 teams that have not taken the chance to pit. Because into the pits for a second time comes Team TFD, who are currently running in 11th position up to that point. So of the teams that have made pit stops, the leading crew is the Ares Pro team. That's the team that won the title last year. That gives you a little bit of an appreciation of the sort of the style of driving that's required. I have to say, I got some laps in these karts yesterday around this course in the dry conditions. I really wish I'd have done so in these damp and wet conditions, because there's a slightly rotund racing driver. You do add a little bit more weight to the kart, so you can get a little bit more traction down in the greasy conditions. These would be the sort of racing conditions I thrive in, because I'm always better in the wet than I am in the dry as a driver. So still, the Eurus Sport and BKRT teams are the ones that set the benchmark for everybody else and have the pace at the moment. 45 seconds clear of Victor Sparholt in the number 19 car. So still the teams trying to just experiment a little bit with lines here, with lines there, but Team Stark finding themselves in third position. 3 different nations in the top 3 positions. In fact, at this point we've got 7 different nations in the top 7 positions. Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, UK, Germany, Belarus and the Czech Republic. And you'll note that not one of those nations is Spain, where there are several teams who have pitted quite early. A lot of these, a lot more experienced teams perhaps on the endurance scene in general, able to go a little bit further on. But is it the fastest way around Karting Campillos? Therein lies the challenge. Drivers still trying to make these moves up the inside and hope that there's going to be enough turn in, and there's a little bit of bumping and barring through the final hairpin. A couple of drivers just trying to stay out of harm's way, and there was a little bit of a drift there. I think that was the Team Stark kart trying to stay out of trouble with several teams in the mix. Whoops, that's an off at the first corner. I think that might be a straight out of the pits. 24 and 14 dueling as they go wheel to wheel down the straight. That's the Atomize Your Life squad. They're going to battle with the Mold Racing team that obviously have a lap coming on to them. They're having to get out of the way without too much difficulty. So there they come again, up the top of the crest. There you go. Still these moves being made by drivers trying to get that little bit of extra upper hand on their rivals and opponents. Got to be so careful about turning. You've got to make it as gradual as possible in the wet, because the turn does want to guide you to the scene of your next accident if you're not careful. What has been good actually is that the driving standards have been fairly statutory around the course. I noticed that the rain has well and truly gone and it has stopped, and now the sun is starting to break out over the circuit, certainly at the first sector. And I can tell you about the weather conditions here at Campillos from previous experience. It dries quickly here. It drains very fast. So it's a good situation for our contenders to be in. Driver changes going on then down in pit lane. Great to see. Very good battles all around the course as everybody's still trying to get themselves up to a relatively good pace. Got to be very careful with how you balance it. Try and keep the kart on the actual track though. Try not to put it on the grass, because that's definitely going to slow you down. So a nice rotation then of the drivers as they come through, making sure that they've got the correct number plate, the correct transponder, and the right driver is in the car that correlates to the transponder, and off they go again. But I like the shuffling of the karts. That's something that you don't get to see an awful lot. And look at that, they've got a wristband on, and it triggers a sensor at the end of the pit lane. Once you scan that, you're allowed to go back out onto the circuit. But again, you still have another holding point where you have to stay in the kart until you have done the minimum of 2 minutes for the pit stop. Once you've done the 2 minutes, then you can head out onto the circuit again. But it has to be a mandatory 2-minute pit stop for every driver and every team. Otherwise, it's not going to be anywhere near as fair for the competition. We want the competition to be as even and as close as possible. And enforcing a minimum pit stop time definitely does that, because it means then that you don't have to worry too much about the rhythm and the pace of your pit stop. Just making sure that you're in and out in good time and that your head is in the right game. You know, you're going to focus on the right objectives at the right times. So it's definitely going to be an interesting situation and a good run for all of our contenders. Now there's a little bit of gesturing going on there. That's interesting. So one or two of the drivers out there clearly deciding, you know, they're not satisfied with something, whatever it might be. It's the 29 giving gestures out there onto the course. That's the EDK endurance driver, Boris Martin Gomez, who clearly is not happy with what's going on either with the other drivers out there on the course, or whether it's the kart, or whether it's the conditions out on the circuit, whatever it might be. He certainly feels quite vocal about it. So he's trying to make his presence felt. I think it was to other drivers though. So it's obviously going to be a very interesting situation for all of our contenders as we continue to battle away for this first morning. Whoops, hopping over the curves and trying to keep it straight. Some great dueling going on. So the competition continuing on in fine style as the drivers are still going to continue in close proximity. You can see some great battles going on the course as there's only a handful of teams now that haven't made their first pit stop. There's actually been a 10-second penalty handed out as well, actually, I've noticed, for 2 carts by the look of it. The number 4 is one of them, so there's a 10-second penalty being handed to the race leaders by the look of it. Now I need to get my Google Translate. So I'm going to quickly get over to Google Translate. There's been a 10-second penalty handed to the number 16 crew. That's the German team, Tomasi Silvan, in 5th position. 10-second penalty handed out to the number 16 crew. And that is for the Grisa Racing team. But there's also a 10-second penalty handed to the leaders, the Eres Sport team. Now I need to figure out what that's for, because there is a note on the timing screen, and of course it is in Spanish, so I obviously need to get my translation device out to double check what the reason for that is. Now, interestingly, the number 4 has been given a 10-second penalty for pushing the number 6 car. That's the Creatia team, and Jonathan Crespo behind the wheel, so they've been given a 10-second penalty for that. And considering that their lead is currently 10.4 seconds, they're quite lucky that they've only got 10.4 seconds on the list, and they've only got a 10-second penalty. It could have been a lot worse than that, depending on the severity of the incident. So still very close proximity, the battles out there on the course. I would still keep an eye on the Creatia team to be a factor in this race, considering they made 2 pit stops. They're already in the top 16. Watch out for the Asphalt Knights as well. They're going to be a factor in this one, as are the Paquetes drivers. Still within the top 15, despite the fact that they've had 2 pit stops. So you really get the sense of the speed of some of these teams. Asphalt Knights, the Portuguese team, are still going to be a factor as well. But a very tricky start to proceedings, that is for sure. And as you can see, the ebb and flow of the change of driving, change of drivers, the pit stops, it's all going very well indeed for our contenders as Senor Lopez is getting ready to get behind the wheel. But the 10-second penalty headed to the Eres Sport team, currently leading the way. That's the most significant point at the moment. And the number 16 crew, apparently, the Grisa Racing team, the number 16 crew, they have been given a 10-second penalty for an avoidable collision. Whoa! Getting a little bit tricky there at the hairpin. Several drivers going very much into Carlos Sainz Senior mode rather than Carlos Sainz Junior, going very sideways there and getting almost rallycross as they run through. But that just shows you how tricky it is in the opening phase of the 30 hours of Campillos 2023.
Very good start so far for the 30 hours of karting Campillos then, and as you can see, the pit lane here is a hive of activity. I am loving the rotational procedure that we have. As you can see, the karts come in at the back of this queue. They're kind of maintained here when they come in, but the drivers do not keep the same kart through the course of the race. They park the original kart up at the first point, and then obviously they take their number plate and their transponder off the kart. They hand them to the capable hands of the mechanics, who are all engineering them and making sure that they're correct in exactly the same way. So then the driver comes forward and they get into a completely different kart to go into the next phase of the race, and that mixes it up. It makes it very even and competitive for everybody, because everybody at some point through the course of the 30 hours will probably end up driving every single kart that's available to them. So it definitely makes it very, very even and very, very close paced. And we're going to have a quick look to see how this procedure works in a little bit more detail. So the drivers will come in at this point of the lap. They'll pull in and obviously come off with the transponder and their number plate. It'll then be handed to the mechanic that will fill up the karts to the brim of the fuel. But then obviously, because there's this rotation of 3 to 4 groups of karts before it, you never end up getting back into the same kart again. And that means you end up having a much more even and competitive race of it. Just over to the side there, you can see the drivers getting ready for their next rotation of the pit stop as well. So they're all getting themselves, they're called over by the pit lane attendant. When they're called in, they know that they're going to be getting into the next kart, and that's being prepared and into the right position. So here you can see the number 37 kart for the Acing Auto Racing team. They've been called into the pits for their stop. The driver gets out, takes off the number plate and the transponder with his ballast, and he hands it to his teammate, is right there. And of course, he's already started putting his ballast into the kart already. The number plate and the transponder are then put onto this particular kart. He's sent out onto the circuit. Now watch this when he comes through as well, because he's got a wristband on, and as he comes past the wristband, he puts his wristband across there, he gets the green light, and then he's able to put back onto the circuit again. But looking at the pit stop, we're going to bring you further forward as well, because they can monitor their own pit stop timings as well. You've obviously had the wristband, he's got to cross it to make sure the green light has gone, but there's also a timing limiter here, and you can see that the driver can actually sense when they are needing to go back out onto the circuit again, because every driver has to do a mandatory 2 minutes of pit stop. So you cannot leave the pits until you have completed 2 minutes. It's fabulous, and it's a great amount of little technical detail, brings it up closer to the world of endurance racing on the FIA ground of things, and it keeps it very even. It makes sure that every team in the grid, be they a novice or an experienced team, have the chance to be even and competitive with everybody else. They're all in the same equipment. They all get to shuffle the deck of cards of the karts that they go out with over the course of the race. So pretty much every team will get the chance to race every kart over the course of the 30 hours. And then, of course, when the time ticks down, the driver can sense when they're going to be back out onto the circuit again. Now, they can't leave the pit until they get to the 2-minute board. He can move himself a little bit further forward. There's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly legal. But obviously, that's just to give him a little bit of chance to get some purchase on the throttle. And you can see, let me show you how greasy it is. You could just make out that line of water that came out off the tyres. Now, they can leave a little bit earlier on than the timer, because it's 2 minutes when they pass that white line at the edge of the pits. So the drivers are trying to get it to a fine point when they can leave, when the timer says about 1:58, 1:59, maybe even 1:57 if you're quite smooth off the throttle, because the timing line is at the end of the pit lane there. So as long as you don't exceed 2 minutes when you cross that white line, then your pit stop is fine. Some teams have been getting it to a fine line to get it to 2-minute 3, 2-minute 4, 2-minute 0.3, I should say, 2-minute 0.4, to try and get it as close and even to it as possible. But the pit stop procedure, really exciting to witness. It's the most interactive part of the race, if you like, and it's really cool to be able to watch these guys as they come through. We'll get to see it again with the 39 crew. Just moves over with the wristband, triggers the sensor, back into the race they go, but they won't be able to actually leave the pit again until they come through. Now that we've got another kart in pits, I actually want to bring you a little bit closer to show you the extent of the greasy conditions we've got. So come and have a look at this if you get an opportunity. I'm straight in. These are fresh tyres that have come in, but look at just how much water, how much residue has come in. It's still very greasy, still very wet out there on the course. So it's basically like having ice skates rather than tyres. You don't get treaded tyres. These Maxxis tyres are all slick. So when you're out there on the course, it's very, very wet, very greasy. It's still going to take probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours for the circuit to really drain. But I can get, look, an incredible amount of water and moisture to come off the tyre. So it's very greasy, very slippery. The drivers are really having to struggle to keep it on the racing line at any point. And that makes it the toughest challenge we've had so far in Karting Campillos. To have a wet start is really, really difficult because you've basically done all of your practice and all of your training in the dry. You've learnt the circuit a certain way. So then to have it completely wet and greasy, it's completely different. So these guys are definitely having to earn their stripes out there. We are now a full first hour into the race, 29 hours still to go. Hopefully the sunshine is going to bake the circuit to a crisp over time and it's going to dry out. But it drains quickly here, so I'll certainly see the lap times increase. Stick with us over the course of the battle. There's still a lot to do, a lot of exciting stuff. We've got our driver just behind us, actually. We need to get out of the way because we've got the number 6 car coming into the pits. That's the Creatia team getting themselves ready for the go. Also worth having a look at what we've got here on the steering wheel. Check this out. Let's get a bit further in as our driver is trying to adjust a timing monitor to the steering wheel so they can keep an eye on their lap time progress. Come and have a look at this. So this is the level to what they've got. The Alfano screen, you can see they can actually keep an eye on their timing laps as they go through as well. And that's really helpful for the driver because that not only tells them how fast they're going at one particular time, as the circuit dries, it will also tell them how much faster the circuit's actually getting. So that will really help them out over the course of proceedings. You'll also notice as well, they have these radio comms communications on the side of the helmet. Now, interestingly, the driver has actually not managed to get the wristband done. So that was a tough moment for the driver. Jumps in. Goodness me. How about that? That was a bit special, wasn't it? The Creatia team clearly limpering up for a good one. Now, we'll get the chance with Senor Santos here on the side. I just wanted to take an eye. Check out. They've got this little radio comms that is onto the side of the circuit. When you're in an endurance race like this, you need to be able to be in communication with the other members of your team. You need to know what's going on. They need to be in communication. What's the circuit doing? What are the battles on the circuit like? Is the track drying out particularly quickly? How well are you doing in the car? Do you need a driver change? You need to be able to communicate that because when you're on the far side of the circuit, it's very difficult to communicate that. You don't have a lot of opportunity with the driver boards or whatever. The driver needs to be able to be in communication with the team back in the pits to have that extra level of data, that extra level of input. While we're waiting for the cars to come out, again, have a look at the number boards and the transponder. Now that transponder communicates not only the lap times the drivers are doing, but which driver is in the car at any time. That will also program which driver is in the car at any time. So we'll be able to know that it's the particular car that's in there. I'm loving the amount of cameras that this guy's got. He's got 2 GoPros, one facing forward and one facing backward. I tell you what, these guys definitely want everybody to know what's going on out there. But perfect. We're now starting to get the sunshine out of Karting Campillos. So the next time you come back to us when we are live again, hopefully the circuit should be bone dry. It'll be a much faster circuit, much faster lap times. So we're going to get to see a very different type of Karting Campillos. We're now past the rain, into the sunshine, and it's going to be a much better part of the Karting Campillos 30 hours. Jake Sanson here in the sunshine now at Campillos. We're going to continue on a little bit later in the day. Stick with us. Loads of exciting stuff still to come. We'll be getting a lot of data in with the reels, with the social media video posts and our live stream. Just stay with us. It's going to be a very exciting race. It'll continue to build up, and we've got a long, long way still to go. See you in a bit.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. The Campillos is a three-way track, and everyone